And good afternoon to you. I'm Christy McDonald. Thanks so much for joining me here on Local 4 Plus as we have our continuing coverage of Jennifer Crumbley on trial. It's the third day of her trial and testimony in the trial. And again, she is the mom of the Oxford High School shooter. She is facing 4 counts of involuntary manslaughter. And we are watching this case so carefully because it is also the first of its kind in a country that the parents of a shooter has been charged criminally in connection with a mass shooting event. All right, so Monday starting off fresh again. We've had 2 witnesses so far, and we're in lunch break right now, and they stopped with the testimony of the Oxford High School counselor, Sean Hopkins. Now, when we talk about this case, so many times people are talking about, well, what's the responsibility of the school here? We talk about responsibility of the parents and, of course, the young man who pulled the trigger. There's so much conversation about what happened inside that counselor's office when he had a meeting with the shooter, calling him down out of class that day after he wrote on his math test, drew a picture of a gun, blood, and a body, and again the words saying, "Help me," when they brought him out of class, and then called Jennifer and James Crumbley to come to the school to talk to them and to talk to their son at the same time. So we are finally hearing a lot of those details. And just to give you a bit of a recap, we're also hearing what the timeline was leading up to November 30th of 2021 and how many times the shooter had interacted with the counselors and with his teachers and what kind of complaints were made. Back in May of 2021, a staff member emailed a counselor, "When you get a chance, call the shooter down to the office. He tries to sleep all the time in class." And then on September 8th of that school year in 21, that he wrote in an autobiography poem that he feels terrible and that his family is a mistake. In November 10th, a teacher wrote, "The shooter's having a tough time. He may need to speak with you." And these are all correspondences sent to the school counselor, Sean Hopkins, who was on the stand today. All right, we're going to go ahead and we want to play for you back some of the testimony that started just after 11 o'clock this morning, where he is talking about once they have that math paper the morning of November 30th, what happened next.
What was your thought when you saw this paper, Exhibit 123?
My first thought was I wanted to get from him what he was doing. His initial response was that it was a video game, that he liked drawing for video games and liked being able to create in that way. So I let him describe it in that way at first, and then I asked him to talk about some of the words that he had written down.
Okay. By this point,
those stuck out to me.
So by this point, had you seen the original drawing?
No.
Okay. So the words you were asking to explain were on this sheet here, 123.
That is correct.
Okay. So what words in particular stood out to you?
I noticed the words of "I love my life so much," "the thoughts won't stop." I could make out "help me" under the crossed out part, and "harmless act." So it made me concerned that a student may potentially be suicidal or be displaying suicidal ideation.
Okay, so I take it you didn't take the defendant's son explanation at face value?
I didn't take it at face value. I accounted for it as his description, but I wanted to make sure that I was looking at as much of a picture as I could.
Okay. So when you reviewed this drawing, and again, this is before you saw the original drawing, did you decide then to ask more pointed questions?
I did. I really wanted to point out the words that were in the drawing because they were the easiest to see, and I wanted to get explanation for the words that wasn't just, "it's a video game."
Okay. Now, when you were speaking with the defendant in your office, did he have a mask on?
He did.
Okay, did you have a mask on?
I did.
Could you tell what his demeanor was at that point?
As best as you could, without complete facial expression. You still have tone of voice, you still have pace of speech.
At this point, you never actually interacted with him without a mask, would that be right?
That is correct.
Okay. So when you asked more pointed questions, tell us what happened next and why.
His demeanor at first was very compliant. And as I started asking about the words and asking him to describe the words, his demeanor shifted towards more of a sad demeanor.
Okay.
He started sharing some things that had gone on in his life.
Like what?
He mentioned that a family dog had died recently. He mentioned that a grandparent had passed, that he was struggling with COVID and with school through COVID. And he mentioned that he had an argument with his parents about grades the night before.
Okay. Did he tell you that a friend of his had abruptly left the state?
He did mention that a friend of his had left. He didn't say the state, just wasn't attending school anymore.
Okay. Now, did you make a decision based upon your conversation with him to call Jennifer Crumbley?
I did.
Okay. Now, is that before or after you saw the original drawing?
I don't remember.
Okay. So during this conversation with the defendant's son, did you have the opportunity to look at the original drawing?
I did receive the original drawing in an email,
Okay.
probably 25 to 30 minutes after retrieving him from class.
So this is Exhibit 74. It's already been admitted. This is the original drawing that was shared with you?
Yes.
Okay. Now, what about this drawing causes you concern as well?
This drawing also gave me a lot of concerns of suicide. When I looked at it and I saw one body, when I looked at it and saw words that were internalized of "the thoughts won't stop, help me," I started becoming concerned about the student's well-being and made the decision that I needed to involve parents.
Okay. So we had talked about checking with the teacher, checking with the student, calling the student in to the office, and a phone call to the parent. Now you decided to not just call the parent, but also call them in?
I did.
Okay. Now in the range of options with a counselor dealing with a parent, this is be the highest option. Would that be right?
This would definitely be up there, yes.
Okay. So when was that decision made? How long, let me ask you this, how long were you with the defendant's son before you made that decision to call his mother?
To the best of my memory, at least 20 minutes.
Okay, so in that 20-minute time span, though, you made the decision to bring her in.
I did.
Okay. Tell us how that happened.
I asked, I actually told the student what I was going to do. I said, here's where we're at, and here's what I have to do. And I let him know that in this case, I need to call your parents and get them involved, because I want to make sure we get you help and support.
Okay.
I then gave student the option to choose which parent he wanted me to call. I do that quite frequently because it gives you an insight into the student a little bit. Of sometimes they might say, please don't call this parent. And student's response was it would be easier to get a hold of mom. So we called mom.
Okay. Now, did you tell him that you had concerns of suicidal ideation before you called Jennifer Crumbley?
I do not believe that I told him that, no.
And you indicated that you had seen in the fall of 2021 other aspects of suicidal ideation in other students?
Yes.
Okay. And you said even some students had even attempted suicide?
Sadly, yes.
Okay. So you've had these sort of meetings where you call a parent in before?
I have.
Okay. And you said it was the defendant's son to call Jennifer Crumbley, or at least you'd have an easier time getting a hold of her?
Yeah, that was the statement. So I called mom, and I
Mom
believe,
being the defendant, Jennifer Crumbley?
yes, that is
Okay.
correct. And she was unable to answer that phone call. So I then asked,
Well, how do you know that? It went to voicemail?
yes,
Okay.
she did not answer
She
that
didn't
phone
answer.
call.
Okay.
And so I asked the student if it was okay for me to call his dad, and he said yes. I called dad, and it sounded like there was an answer, but it was also kind of like just dead air on the phone.
Okay.
So I hung up, and a few moments later, I received a phone call back from Jennifer Crumbley.
Okay. Now, if I told you that we had phone logs admitted into evidence that showed you left a message for Jennifer Crumbley at 9:24 a.m., would that sound right to you?
That sounds about right, yes.
Okay. And then it appeared from those same records that she had called you back at 9:27 a.m. Does that also sound right?
That sounds about right.
Okay. Tell us about that conversation between you and Jennifer Crumbley at 9:27 a.m.
I let her know that I had the student in my office and I had some concerns and was hoping that she would be able to come into the school.
Was that on your office line?
It was on my office line, yes.
Did you have the cell phone to your ear, or was it speakerphone?
At that point, it was to my ear, and I believe that mom asked to speak with Ethan, or the student. So I then put it on speakerphone and allowed them to talk to each other as well.
Okay, tell me about that, please.
Mom asked the student what was going on, and he didn't really have much, just kind of.
Okay. Did you tell the defendant that you had a drawing you were going to send her, the math worksheet?
I believe I did, yes,
Okay.
and then I sent it to her,
Okay.
to her cell phone.
And did she comment on that drawing, the math worksheet, to you while she was on the phone with you?
Not to my memory.
You indicated to Jennifer Crumbley that you needed her to come into the office. Is that what you said?
Yes.
Okay. Did she say, okay, I'll be right there, or did she say something else?
She was hoping that Dad would be able to do it, that it would be difficult for her to get there to leave work, and that she worked approximately 30 minutes from the school.
Okay. And that was 9:27 a.m. And when she told you that it'd be difficult for her to come there, was that on speakerphone?
I do not remember.
Okay. So what was your, in the records it shows about a 5-minute phone call between you and Jennifer Crumbley at that point in time. Were you left with the impression that she was on her way then, or that you had to find another parent?
I was left with the impression that she was going to try and contact Dad to have Dad come. And then approximately 10 minutes later, she called again saying that she was unable to get a hold of Dad and that she would be on her way.
So I think what's really interesting to take from this, and this is about where the testimony was ending up just before we broke for lunch. So I would assume once we come back from lunch, they're going to be talking about, once James and Jennifer Crumbley actually get there, what the meeting was about. But if you listen to Sean Hopkins talking about all of the things leading up to this, that they were thinking more of suicidal feelings, that he had sadness, depression in that way, that it was a social emotional issue, and didn't say anything about that he could maybe be aggressive towards others. Even when you looked at the timeline of the times that he interfaced with the school counselor about that November 29th email, that he was searching up bullets and ammunition in his English class, that then the morning of the 30th, he was watching a video on his phone in the first hour talking about watching shootings. I'm going to bring in Sean Lay right now, who is covering the case as well. He's up at the courthouse. Sean, we've had a lot go on this morning, and we're going to get to the first witness of the day, Kara Pinnock, in just a minute. But I want to talk to you about, just even the feeling of when Sean Hopkins went to take the stand, the importance of hearing what actually happened in that counselor's office that very day.
And Sean Hopkins, Christy, testified during the exam almost a year ago, and we listened to all of his words then, and almost identical now. He's a school counselor, as you say, and he's presented with a copy of that math worksheet from the shooter. And he's talking about kind of backing up what he did, what he said, what he was thinking, just like you were saying. And if you look at that worksheet again, Christy, we've seen it a lot. You got a person drawn with blood coming out. You've got a picture of a handgun. You've got the words won't stop, or the thoughts won't stop. Help me. And so, look, we're both parents, and we're not going to give our opinion, on news program. But at the same time, as a parent, you've got Columbine, kind of to Parkland. So why isn't the thought process, let's err on the side of caution here. Let's take every precaution possible. We hear about school threats and the school shuts down. Here you're presented with the worksheet, and the whole time, why is he thinking suicide the whole time? He's focused on the youth, and he cares about him, but at the same time, you're presented with that evidence. Why isn't more done at that point? That's what a lot of families, of course, want to know. What went wrong here? So Sean Hopkins is up there. He'll be up again on the witness stand at 1 o'clock. Maybe we'll learn more about what he thought, and did he hand things off to the administration, and what happened in that meeting then when the Crumbleys come in and they're sitting there with their son and the backpack is right there and never checked. So those are the things we'll be looking for. But, as a parent, Christy, it's disturbing. Why so focused on suicide and suicide ideology? That's interesting, because you want him to care, he's a counselor, for the student. But why not take another step just to make sure, everything's okay?
Yeah, and having his testimony in this case, again, because we have to remind people that it's Jennifer Crumbley who is on trial here for involuntary manslaughter, and the prosecution's burden of saying, could she have foreseen that something like this would happen? And did her action or inaction lead to this event here? And when you think about the gun and the knowledge that she had, that they bought him a gun, and did they not share that then with the school, with the counselor in that meeting?
They didn't. We all know that, right? So they're both sitting there. They're describing, having trouble getting a hold of them, and that goes to, these parents were ignoring their son out to lunch. They cared more allegedly about their horses, things of that nature. They brought up extramarital affairs, things of that nature. But they're sitting there with the son, and they presented with the worksheet with the gun drawn on it. It looks just like the gun that we saw the video from the Acme gun shop up there in Oxford that. They bought him this handgun. We saw the disturbing video practicing with the handgun. Just sitting there and not saying, well, we bought him a gun for Christmas. We think this is going to be a good outlet for him to go shooting, possibly hunting, is never brought up. So we're not blaming Sean Hopkins, but there's a lot of that kind of evidence. But at the same time, Shannon Smith, the attorney for Jennifer Crumbley, is going to present evidence that she absolutely had no idea that her son was going down this path. Part of that, Christy, is that Shannon Smith is fighting to have the doctors who interviewed the shooter after the shooting, they want those doctors on the witness stand because apparently what they are arguing is that the shooter kind of he went back on what he was saying, said, he was texting a friend. I reached out to my mom. I'm having hallucinations. I need mental help right now. It's urgent. They're ignoring me. And then apparently, Christy, he told doctors that wasn't true. He was exaggerating that. And so, that leads to the defense saying, look, Jennifer Crumbley had no idea that her son was traveling down this path. And you can kind of see that with their flip responses to each other. Going to buy a gun, we're going to go shooting. And then the day before the shooting, is caught looking up ammunition in the text, back from, he gets in trouble, tells her mom, and she texts back, oh, don't get caught next time. So does that show someone who's callous and, doesn't care? Does it show like she's, buddy with her son and she doesn't think he's heading down the direction of a school shooting?
Yeah, and you made mention of those psychiatrists and psychologists, and they're asserting their privilege right now. So we might not hear from them in this case, and that's still being worked through. I do want to bring up when you talk about negligence, and this is what is part of it, and the prosecution trying to build their case that the Crumbleys and specifically Jennifer here spent more time and money on her horses, on other things than she did on her son, and that really brings us to the first testimony of the day from the woman who owned the barn, and Kira Pennick, and she talked about how much those horses cost to board them, and she also then talked in those text messages back and forth, even after the shooting or after she met Jennifer Crumbley did with the counselors, she was still planning on taking a riding lesson that afternoon and said, well, I'm going to have to bring him along with me because he can't be alone.
That's solid evidence for prosecutors. Is there enough, though, to prove gross negligence? That's the burden that prosecutors have here. We just saw in Detroit, Christy, was a similar case. Detroit police officer punches an older gentleman, 71 years old. He falls, and the gentleman died 3 weeks later. And the judge in that case, Judge King, he kicked out the case. It did not prove gross negligence here. That, Jennifer Crumbley has this working knowledge that her son was going down the path of a school shooting and was more interested in horses and was spending money on boarding the horses there and medical care for the horses. And then she says in a text message, yes, you just pointed out, he can't be alone. And she called him weird. And we're talking about Kira Pennick, who owns the barn and the horse area up there. She points that out. But then Shannon Smith asked her, Pennick said, as soon as the shooting happened, I knew it was her son. But then on cross-examination, she said, well, if you knew that and all this evidence apparently that you're worried about him, did you call anybody? Did you call authorities? Did you call the school? I'm worried about this kid. What's going on? Let's check him out. And she said no, but we'll see what shakes out coming forward. There's a lot of that kind of, is it circumstantial evidence or is it hard evidence that Jennifer Crumbley knew or just didn't care enough to see if her son was in deep mental crisis and things of that nature. So there's a lot of that. Is it enough? Well, yeah.
One other thing that happened today, we actually heard from Jennifer Crumbley in court. So this was really interesting.
First,
a lot of the evidence we're seeing is coming through text messages and also messages on Facebook Messenger between Jennifer and James Crumbley. And some of those messages have been redacted, right? So they're taking out information that is not admissible in court. So about alcohol use or drug use, certain things that the judge already said at the beginning of the trial, we're throwing this out, they cannot be used. Well, this morning, Jennifer Crumbley actually said that those messages now can all be used in their entirety. Interesting what the defense is going to try to prove on that. Sean, stay with me 1 second. I want to show what happened earlier on today.
We have talked about how during the trial there was talk about redacting portions of that Facebook Messenger thread pursuant to other orders, correct? And the court offered me the opportunity to redact portions of that record. Correct. And after you and I discussed it, it's fair to say that you and I believe that it would look like we are hiding evidence from the jury if they saw a redacted version of Exhibit 423. Correct? Correct. Okay, wait till I finish speaking before you start. Okay, so at this time, I have let the court know that we are not moving for any redactions and that Exhibit 423 will be admitted, showing your entire phone conversation with James on Facebook Messenger. And Your Honor, there's specific dates it's from, so I think I should put the dates on the record.
It might be on the...
Yeah, I'll just grab it. Oh, I'm sorry, I don't have the exhibit. It wasn't with the initial folder I had. Do you know the dates?
January 21.
Okay, so they're
early 2021.
It's the entire Facebook Messenger thread between you and Mr. Crumbley starting in January of 2021, and it goes up through the events that lead us here today. Correct. Okay, is it your decision to allow those Facebook messages to be admitted in the court without redaction? Yes. And you and I have talked about the pros and cons of redacting those exhibits. Correct. And at this time, you understand they will be admitted without any redactions. I do.
And just a few.
Sure.
Mrs. Crumbley, you understand that Exhibit 423 won't just be given to the jury, but the prosecution can go through that with either you on a cross-examination or with other witnesses.
Correct.
And you've consulted with your attorney specifically about that point?
Yes.
And it is your decision as a defendant in the case, in consultation with your attorney as part of trial strategy, to admit this entire exhibit?
Yes.
Okay. And to be clear, this is the Facebook message thread between Jennifer and James Crumbley beginning January 1, 2021. And it's over 2,000 pages long.
Exhibit 423.
And Mrs. Crumbley, you understand that throughout the pendency of this case, your attorney on your behalf has sought to exclude certain themes or topics of evidence, in some cases successfully, yet this Facebook conversation does touch upon some of those.
I understand.
And you still want 423 to be admitted into evidence and referenced by the prosecution and defense?
Yes.
I'm satisfied.
All right, Sean, what do you make of that? This is before you head back into court. You get the last word.
Yeah, so defense attorney Shannon Smith, early in the exam and, fighting this, she doesn't want everything, the jury to see everything. So she wants to redact some things, possibly, for fear the jury might take it the wrong way. But Jennifer Crumbley says, put it all out there. Put it all out there. And what I'm thinking, when I'm hearing that today, and she's the first person to speak up in court, show all the messages, is that when we message, maybe there's not a whole lot of filter there. And it really takes like a deep dive into her mindset, exactly what she was thinking at the time. Concerned about the horses, presented with the worksheet from her son, violent, saying, I'm still going to come, presented with that, I'm still going to come have the lesson. The shooting occurs, and then I got to sell my horses. I'm going to need $200,000 from an attorney. And then there's some things about, very clearly, Sheriff's Office said these two are on the run. That was kind of a shocking development, right? They're going from motel to motel, taking money out, those kind of things. And then later, the text messages are showing that she's sending to her horse keeper there, Kara Pennick, is, hey, the news is right in front of our house. We can't go there. The things being said on Facebook are so alarming and threatening. We're in hiding. It's for our safety. So maybe she wasn't on the run. She's, showing the jury there that her thought exactly was safety for them after their son committed this outrageous, horrible act.
Yeah, we'll have to see how this one is going to play out. All right, thanks so much, Sean. We know you're going to be watching back as court heads up into session. We'll talk to you in a little bit.